Some love in silence. Some spend a decade standing beside someone who never truly sees them. Tonight, the New York skyline was quieter than usual. The city lights shimmered against the dark sky, their reflections scattered across the river like 1,000 shattered crystals. Inside a small apartment on the 18th floor, Lillian Carter sat by the window, an open journal resting on her lap. Her pen glided lightly over the page. Date. He told me about another woman today. He smiled, as if she were the only thing that mattered, and I nodded. I listened. I smiled. Just like I always do. She paused, fingers tightening around the pen. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady herself, to keep from drowning in the memories. A winter night, standing in the rain for hours just to catch a glimpse of him. The countless nights spent fixing his reports while he slept soundly on the couch. The way he spoke about another woman, never once realizing how her heart broke each time. She knew this feeling all too well. A quiet, lingering love, burning like a small flame, never bright enough to be seen. Closing the journal, Lillian lifted her gaze to the night sky through the window. She had held on to this love for so long, but how much longer could she endure? Lillian set her journal down on the desk, her eyes lingering on the words she had just written. Memories stirred, pulling her back to where it all began, 10 years ago. That autumn at Columbia University, the campus was painted in shades of gold and amber. Lillian was just a quiet freshman in fashion design, always sitting in the back of the lecture hall, observing the world in silence. One afternoon, a tall young man rushed into class, arms overloaded with thick binders and loose papers. In his hurry, he misstepped on the platform and crash. Papers scattered across the floor as the room filled with quiet chuckles. No one moved to help except for Lillian. She knelt down, gathering each page carefully, stacking them neatly before handing them back to him. "Thanks. What's your name?" he asked, scratching the back of his head, an awkward smile on his lips. Lillian. That was the first time she met Nathan Sullivan, a brilliant yet absent-minded sophomore majoring in finance. From that day on, he effortlessly pulled her into his world. Late-night study sessions at the library, rushed coffee runs before lectures, shared conversations about dreams and ambitions. Before she realized it, they had become best friends. But only friends, at least in Nathan's eyes. For Lillian, however, from the moment she picked up his fallen papers, her heart had no longer been her own. Over the years, she remained the one constant in his life. When he failed his first business pitch, she was the one who helped him pinpoint his mistakes. When he drowned himself in alcohol after a heartbreak, she drove across the city in the pouring rain just to bring him home. When he secured his first major investment deal, she was the first person he called. Yet not once did he ever look at her the way she wished he would. The memories faded, pulling Lillian back to the present. A bitter smile touched her lips. 10 years had passed, and Nathan still hadn't truly seen her. Lillian let out a quiet sigh, closing her journal and leaning back against her chair. The past clung to her like a shadow, a constant reminder that no matter how much time had passed, she had never truly let go. Her phone suddenly lit up on the desk. Nathan's name flashed across the screen. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Lillian, finally, you picked up." His voice was full of relief and excitement. "I need a favor, just for one night." Lillian tightened her grip on the phone. She knew all too well that whenever Nathan needed her, it was never just one night. "What is it?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "There's this event tomorrow. I need a date to keep things simple. You know how these business partners are? They're always trying to set me up with their daughters." He spoke as if this was the most trivial request in the world, and maybe, to him, it was. Lillian closed her eyes, picturing him laughing with other women, while she remained nothing more than a quiet presence in the background. And yet she still said yes. Not because she wanted to be his pretend girlfriend, but because she didn't know how to be anything else in his life. Lillian gazed at the New York skyline through her window, the distant lights reflecting off the dark waters of the Hudson River. The past still clung to her, whispering reminders that no matter how hard she tried, she could never stop loving Nathan. But loving him had never been easy, and tonight was yet another painful proof of that. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the emerald green gown she had chosen for the evening. She hadn't picked it because it was her favorite color, but because she knew Nathan liked it. A small habit so ingrained in her she barely noticed it anymore. Her phone buzzed. Nathan. "Lillian, are you here yet?" His voice was impatient. "I need you." He always needed her, but he never wanted her. She took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and stepped out of her apartment. The Rosewood Hotel ballroom was bathed in golden light, filled with the hum of polite laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. Investors, executives, and elegant women in designer gowns filled the space. And at the center of it all was Nathan. He was flawless, as always, tall, confident, his black suit fitting him perfectly. When his eyes found her, a pleased smile curved his lips. "Lillian, finally!" He strode toward her, taking her hand without hesitation. She smiled, just as she always did. The evening played out predictably. Nathan charmed his business partners, introduced her as the most important person in my life. Her heart skipped a beat, but she knew those words didn't mean what she wished they did. The atmosphere shifted when a familiar figure entered the room. Sophia, Nathan's ex, the woman who had left him for someone wealthier. She approached them, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. "Nathan, what a surprise. Still haven't found anyone to replace me?" Her voice dripped with amusement. Nathan's grip on his glass tightened. Lillian could feel the tension in his stance. And then Sophia turned her attention to her. Or are you still using your loyal little best friend as a stand-in? How pitiful." Lillian stiffened. She wanted to retort, to defend herself, but before she could say anything, Nathan moved. He set his glass down, turned toward her, and suddenly pulled her into a kiss. She barely had time to react. His lips pressed against hers, warm and firm. The sounds of the party faded into nothing. Lillian felt his warmth, the familiar scent of his cologne, her heart pounding erratically in her chest. She had imagined this moment countless times, but not like this, not just to prove something to Sophia. After a few seconds, Nathan pulled away and turned back to Sophia, his expression calm and composed. "See, Sophia, I'm not as alone as you think." Sophia raised an eyebrow, unimpressed, then shrugged and walked away. Laughter and applause rippled through the room, but Lillian heard none of it. All she could feel was the ache settling deep inside her. Nathan turned back to her, flashing an easy smile. "Just a pretend kiss, thanks for helping me with that. You really are the best friend ever." Something inside her cracked. She lowered her gaze, forcing a small smile. "I need to get some water." Then she walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her vision blurring. Because the kiss she had waited 10 years for had been nothing but an act. The party ended and Nathan walked Lillian to her car, his usual carefree smile in place. "Thanks, Lillian. You're a lifesaver as always." She simply nodded, forcing a small smile in response. On the way home, the city lights blurred past the car window, but Lillian didn't see any of them. One thought consumed her mind. How much longer can I keep doing this? The next day, she didn't reply to Nathan's messages, nor did she answer when he called. One day, 2 days, then a week. Lillian began to pull away. No more morning coffee runs. No more late-night conversations about his work. Nathan noticed. He texted, called, even stopped by her design studio, only to receive the same short response. "I'm busy." At first, he assumed she was just swamped with work, but then, during a business meeting, he spotted her across the room, laughing with a new colleague, Mark. Lillian tilted her head, smiling in a way Nathan had never really noticed before, or maybe he had just never paid attention. His chest tightened with something unfamiliar. After the meeting, he pulled her aside, his voice lower than usual. "Since when have you been close with Mark?" Lillian blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Then she let out a quiet chuckle. "He's just a friend, like you and me." Nathan froze. She held his gaze, steady and unwavering, then turned and walked away. For the first time, Nathan felt something he couldn't quite name. A strange emptiness, Nathan stood frozen in the hallway, watching as Lillian disappeared from view. Her words echoed in his mind. "He's just a friend, like you and me." A simple sentence, but it unsettled him in a way he couldn't understand. Why? He didn't know. He only knew that ever since she began pulling away, everything in his life had started to feel wrong. No more morning texts reminding him to grab coffee. No more late-night calls filled with conversations that seemed trivial but somehow mattered the most. No more someone who was always there, listening to every word he said, no matter how insignificant. Nathan noticed it, but he didn't act on it. He convinced himself she was just busy, that she needed space, that soon things would return to normal. But weeks passed, and the distance between them only grew wider. Then one day, a crisp white envelope sat neatly on his desk. Nathan picked it up, his pulse quickening when he saw the name Lillian Carter in the corner. Without thinking, he tore it open, scanning the familiar handwriting. "Nathan, for 10 years I have loved you in silence, but you never saw me. I once thought that just being by your side was enough, but I was wrong. I need to learn to love myself more than I love someone who will never see me. Paris is my fresh start. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I wish you happiness. Lillian." His fingers clenched the letter so tightly that the edges crumpled beneath his grip. Lillian was gone. He stood motionless, but inside, a storm raged. Paris. She had left. No more brief replies, no more silent hesitations, no more waiting for him to realize something he had failed to see. And for the first time in his life, Nathan felt real fear. Not the fear of losing a friend, but the fear that he had just lost the most important person in his life forever. Nathan sat frozen, the crumpled letter still clenched in his hands. Yet he couldn't bring himself to let it go. Lillian was gone. Not a fleeting distance, not a temporary silence he could brush off. She had left, permanently. A sharp ache twisted in his chest. A foreign sense of panic clouded his thoughts. For 10 years he had never once considered a life where Lillian wasn't by his side. She had always been there, listening, supporting, standing beside him through every important moment. And yet he had never stopped to ask himself, how much does she mean to me? Now what? Her apartment was empty. Her phone no longer rang when he called. Every trace of her in his life had disappeared. A wave of panic surged through Nathan. He pulled out his phone, dialing her number. "The number you are calling is currently unavailable." The automated response cut through the silence, and for the first time in his life, Nathan felt truly lost. He scrolled through old messages, fingers hovering over their past conversations. She had always been there, always responding instantly, but now all he was met with was silence. And in that moment, the realization struck him. He had lost her, and worse, perhaps, he had loved her all along without even knowing it. Nathan gripped his phone, but his fingers trembled slightly. The weight of realization crashed down on him, suffocating. He had been blind for too long, taking her presence for granted, never imagining a world where she wasn't by his side. But now, that world was real, and it was unbearable. He exhaled sharply, shoving aside the fear threatening to paralyze him. He couldn't let her walk away like this. He couldn't let 10 years end with a letter. Without hesitation, he made a call. "Book me a flight to Paris, as soon as possible." The flight to Paris lasted over 10 hours, but for Nathan, every minute felt like torture. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except one relentless thought. Was it too late to fight for her? The plane touched down just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Paris in hues of gold and crimson. Nathan wasted no time. The moment he exited the airport, he hailed a taxi straight to the address his assistant had tracked down, the fashion studio where Lillian was now working. The car pulled up in front of a charming old building. Through the large glass windows, Nathan saw her. Lillian stood in the middle of the room, a design board in hand, her expression focused as she discussed something with her colleagues. She looked radiant, confident, yet somehow more distant than ever. For the first time, Nathan realized she belonged here, not as the quiet friend who always stood behind him, but as a woman who had built a life of her own. A small voice in his head whispered, "What if she's already moved on?" But he wasn't giving up. Taking a deep breath, Nathan pushed open the door. The room fell into a stunned silence as Lillian turned toward him, her blue eyes widened in disbelief. "Nathan..." Her voice wavered. He didn't give her time to ask questions. Ignoring the stares from everyone around them, Nathan walked straight to her and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry." His voice was raw, thick with emotion. Lillian froze. She didn't push him away, but she didn't embrace him either. Slowly, she stepped back, studying him with cautious eyes. "What are you doing here?" Nathan met her gaze. This time, he didn't look away. "I came to tell you something I should have realized long ago. I love you, Lillian." She stared at him, lips parted, eyes shimmering with a mixture of emotions: hope, fear, disbelief. "Nathan, don't say that unless you're sure." A small smile tugged at his lips as he shook his head. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Lillian bit her lip, her emotions a storm within her. For the first time in 10 years, Nathan wasn't looking at her as a friend. He was looking at her as the woman he could never afford to lose again. Lillian's heart pounded in her chest. She had imagined this moment 100 times, yet she never truly believed it would happen. Nathan stood before her, his deep brown eyes filled with something she had never seen before. No more indifference, no more obliviousness. He finally saw her. "Lillian," his voice was hushed, as if afraid that one wrong move would make her disappear forever. "I can't change the past, but I can promise you a future, if you'll just give me a chance." Lillian bit her lip. For 10 years she had waited for him to see her. She had hurt, she had walked away, she had learned to love herself again. But the man standing before her was no longer the same Nathan who had once been blind to her love. She could see it in his eyes. The certainty, the fear of losing her, and most importantly, the love she had always longed for. Lillian took a deep breath. "If I say yes, will you promise never to let me go again?" Nathan let out a breathless chuckle, filled with regret and determination. He took her hand, holding it tightly. "Never." 1 second, 2 seconds, and then she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around his neck. Nathan pulled her close, not out of desperation, not as part of an act. When their lips met, time stood still. It wasn't a kiss of convenience. It wasn't a pretense. It was a kiss between two souls who had finally found their way back to each other. Paris glowed under the golden city lights, but to them, nothing in the world was more beautiful than this moment. No more distance, no more words left unsaid, only them, and a love that had finally come full circle. Date, 2025. Paris looks even more beautiful when I'm no longer alone. Lillian set her pen down, her fingers gently tracing the page. It had been a long time since she last wrote in her journal, but today she felt the need to capture this moment. She gazed out the window. The Parisian sky was crystal clear, the soft morning sunlight spilling over the narrow streets, painting the city in warm golden hues. Beside her, Nathan was still asleep, one arm unconsciously reaching out for her. Lillian smiled. It had been a year since the day he came to Paris to find her. At first, she hadn't allowed herself to believe his words. She was afraid it was just a fleeting impulse. But Nathan had proven otherwise. With patience, with the little things, with the choice to stay in Paris with her instead of returning to New York. And last night, on the rooftop of her design studio, under the glow of twinkling lights, he had knelt before her, holding a ring and the old journal she had once left behind in New York. "I was a fool for so many years, but now I know exactly what I want. Lillian Carter, will you marry me?" She had cried, but this time they were not tears of pain or regret. She had nodded. Now she flipped to the next page of her journal and wrote one more line. Sometimes it takes years for two hearts to find each other, but when they do, it's forever.